The stream is live, my friends, and now I'm very excited to welcome back two of the best college football cappers in the land. You know them as Mr. Ralph Michaels from WagerTalk.com and Mr. Chris Fallica from Fox Sports. Please follow them on Twitter at CalSportsLV and at Chris Fallica. This segment is brought to you by Circus Sports. For the best contests in all of the land, please visit circusports.com/contest for over 16 million in guaranteed prizes, getting Circa Millions and Circa Survivor. Guys, here we are. College football is in the red zone. Carson Beck is back to pass. Ralph, how's your summer looking, man? How'd you do this summer, and what you been up to?
Good. I actually started college football work earlier. So as far as the major conferences are concerned, I am so far ahead. I sort of, I really struggle with like the MAC conference. You would think I'm in Cleveland and I know all those MAC teams. So I honestly just put a little less work into it and spend time and work that I've had success. So not that I won't look at the MAC and still get caught up in the next couple weeks, but when we go through one or two of those lower conferences, I may not have too much to say just because I haven't done my due diligence yet.
No, that's fair enough, man. We always have a fully loaded show. I'm not worried about any time being in the way. We will definitely take all the time because that's what we do. Chris, how about you, man? What was your summer like?
My summer was busy, and like and unlike Ralph, I have not put any work into the MAC. Like I am behind on like my big conferences, and I put even less work into some of this, like the MAC, nothing at all. But the other ones, I kind of have done some stuff. But I'm not where I want to be with everything in the power conference because I was out at Fox in LA for 5 weeks covering soccer, so I had a lot of soccer content, a lot of soccer work, and a lot of soccer handicapping, which worked out really well. We caught Rodri at 30-1 to win the player of the tournament in Euros, and we had some other bets that worked out well. Argentina to win Copa. So the soccer was profitable. It was good, but it stuck me a little bit behind in college football. But I'm getting close now. By the way, I wish I would have known this was a circus show. I would have went back to my shelf and gotten my 2024 Circa Survivor hat and worn it.
Oh, it's okay. I have a collection now, my friend. We will advertise for the Circa as much as they have us, and that is the best place to be in the land. And you just got into the Survivor. That is awesome. Are you gonna do a couple entries, one, or what contest did you get into?
I did four entries for Survivor. I didn't do Circa Millions just because I kind of feel like I'm dead money in that. He got to hit close to 70% to really have a chance of winning that. And I don't think I'd be doing that. So I played 4 entries in Survivor. I entered the Golden Nugget contest because that's the one contest remaining out there that you can use college football picks. Unfortunately, the Will Hill contest, college contest is gone. And I did enter the Superbook NFL season wins contest. So that's my my Vegas contest spree for the upcoming football season. I'm sure you and Ralph are burying me there.
Well, I don't know yet. We hope so. Sometimes a lot of work can go out the window when things don't come to fruition, but this is why we're here to talk about it all, man. And I'm excited. I guess you got in 4 for the 4 Jets losses that are going to happen this year, so it makes sense.
I will sign up for 13 and a 4 in a heartbeat right now, my friend. From your lips to God's ears.
Oh, absolutely, you will, man. I was just kind of thinking, imagine a Jets-Packers Super Bowl. Rodgers facing his old team against Love. Oh man, that would just be. I'd eat that alive. That would be just wonderful to see that situation. Even though I'm a Bears fan, I can't stand the Packers, but just to see Rodgers beat them after they let him go, that would be a hell of a lot of fun. But either way, there's this nasty rumor going around, Chris, about you that you've never been to a Culver's. And I'm like, what? This can't be true.
It is true. Now, if you can tell me the location of a Culver's in the Madison, Wisconsin area, I will promise you that I will attend a Culver's in the weekend leading up to the Alabama-Wisconsin game, where a big noon kickoff will be on that, 3rd Saturday of the season, I believe it is.
Chris, it is, and I might be there myself, but I'll even do you one better. Culver's, I'm going to give you what to eat at Culver's, so I hope you got your pencil sharpened right now. This is my favorite order, and Culver's literally, and I talked to humans about it and some other guys. I have Culver's as my number 1 or number 2 with Portillo's, just like Matt. When we talked about it last year, Culver's has some special menu stuff, and it's huge. And you gotta go with the Butterburger, and I do the double one. There's a triple one, believe it or not. But
that doesn't sound. Yeah, that sounds a little rough.
Little rough. That's for those big-minded people. But the double Butterburger is absolutely fine. You get that with the fries. Is it the number 1 fries in the world? No, but it's definitely up there. But number 2, you got to get the Wisconsin cheese curds. Okay?
Oh, of course,
fried cheese curds, and I personally dip them in marinara or ranch. And if you really want to get technical, we could do a whole show on cheese curds, literally. Yeah,
I did a majority of the podcast yesterday with those guys about White Castle. So anytime we want to talk about food, I'm down.
I saw that photo, by the way, at White Castle. Yeah, but cheese curds, Wisconsin delicacy, but I mean, it doesn't matter. You got to get them at Culver's. They're just absolutely wonderful. And for dessert, frozen custard, just straight up vanilla frozen custard. You got to try that before you get the turtle sundae. That's your second stop on your way to the airport, is when you go back and get the turtle sundae. But you got to try the frozen custard first. I'm pretty sure this is going to easily break into your top 5. And if you want the original location, Chris, the first Culver's ever is about 15 to 20 miles west of Camp Randall, in Sauk City, where it all started. That was the original Culver's ever started in Sauk City, Wisconsin. But if you really want to stay close, they're literally all over Madison, man. You can just go to Apple Maps and you can find one on your way out.
Are you sponsored by Circa, Kiev?
What's that?
Are you sure this pod was sponsored by Circa, or was it maybe sponsored by?
Well, we'll have to give them
the first ever pod, the first ever Culver's in Arizona. Owned by Kiev O'Neill.
Yeah, there you go. It's funny is that I really considered opening a few when I was a kid. I was too young, but when me and my little brother was on our way up north in our big van, I was like, there's like 2 or 3 of them, and we had the frozen custard, and we asked our parents to open some Culver's, and they laughed at us. And now it's like, seriously, could have been millionaires, multi-millionaires, if we just would have opened one of those 900 locations across the land. But now that they don't have it in Vegas, it got me thinking again, Ralph. I was like, geez, should I go just decide to quit sports betting and open a couple Culver's in Vegas? Maybe that'd be a little bit less stressful. Ralph, tell me you've been to Culver's.
I've been to Culver's 1 time. That's it. Okay. I was driving across country with Brian Leonard, and Brian Leonard is like you, where he says, I really do like Culver's. So I tried the pot roast, though, and I did not have the it sounded neat to me having a pot roast sandwich. And it was good, but that's the only thing I've tried at Culver's.
Okay, and the Butterburger is where you got to start. And, Chris, I expect a full report when you're leaving Madison. Very excited for you to do that. So let's get into some college football. Enough about food. Get too hungry. We have to talk about little season win totals here. Ralph, you compiled the information on what happened last year to the season win total bets, and I believe your numbers were from June. How did the season win total go with 133 teams that we had last year?
Well, I've done it most years, and it's pretty much the same percentage. Last year, there were 5 pushes with the 133 win totals. And again, most win totals start at a half, but when I took the numbers in June, there were some even numbers, therefore you get the pushes. 68 unders, 60 overs, so about 53%, and that's been about the average. And just an FYI, when I looked at the top and the bottoms for last year, 4 teams had a win total of 10.5. All 4 went over the total. Ohio State, Michigan, Bama, Georgia. 3 teams had a win total of 10. Florida State went over. Clemson and USC went under. Starting at the bottom, 1 team had a win total of 1.5. They went over the total. 2 teams had a win total of 2.5. They went 1 and 1.
Who was 1.5, Ralph? Akron?
UMass.
Okay.
I was going to say Temple, UMass, Akron, or UConn, probably.
And then Temple and Akron were 2.5. They split going 1 and 1. And then at 3.5, there was 7, 6, and 1. So, there's a reason those teams are rated that high on season win totals. And it's scary to do, and you only lose 1 game. But we'll talk about that this year, that it's so much different with a win total, because often when you had a team that you had to have 10.5 wins and they had an early win, they sometimes had that bubble burst mentality where one win cost them 2. Now with the expanded playoffs, the college football season is much, much less meaningful, because you can have that early season loss and it won't make one iota of a difference. I mean, I guarantee you there's going to be at least 3 Big Ten teams and 3 SEC teams. So those top tier teams don't have the pressure they used to have.
It's a great call. I agree with you. As a matter of fact, I was looking for a prop, or thinking of one. I had a prop guy on a few weeks ago that no team is undefeated by the end of conference championship. And we don't even have to go to the bowl. Now you got Liberty there, of course. You got Boise State.
I was going to say, you probably have to make it amongst the Power 4 leagues, right?
You could have one for the Power 4, or you could have it for everybody and just change the juice, I suppose. But it doesn't mean that Boise and Liberty are going undefeated. Obviously, it just makes it a lot easier for them to go undefeated than a lot of these other. But yeah, for the Power 4, I would almost say, even if it was juiced a little bit, I would go to the under, because I don't think any of them is escaping them without a loss. Is that fair, Chris?
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. That would be a really good prop. Because I think is Georgia as good as they are. I think there's a not really good chance that they'll lose once. Ohio State, as good as I think they are, they'll be right in a pick 'em toss-up game at Autzen, and they still have Penn State, so there's an opportunity that they'll lose once. No one's running the table in the Big 12. I don't think anybody in the ACC is running the table either. So yeah, well, I'd be curious to see if they put a 1.5 out there for number of undefeateds in the Power 4, what that would be used to. Because I certainly would be very interested in the under.
All right, well, we'll get our text thumbs ready after this show and see if we can get someone to throw it out for us. That'd be wonderful. But that makes sense. Speaking of college football teams and playoffs here, there's like 5 or 6 that are juiced to get into the playoffs at least, and maybe it's 7 or 8. I'm going to relook at it. But Ralph, I'll ask you first. Which do you think any of these teams that are favored? Well, out of the teams that are favored, and I'll mention them in a second if you need to, which one do you think has the best chances of not getting in, or maybe the best odds to bet?
Well, you look at Georgia, and I was pulling up the Georgia schedule. At the beginning of the season, I have an Excel with all the schedules and all my power ratings and home field edges, so it gives you what each line will be in the theoretical win percentage. I mean, you look at Georgia's schedule: 3-point favorite at Alabama, 5-point favorite at Texas, 8-point at Ole Miss. So every game besides that, they're a favorite of 19 or more. So you're looking at those 3 games. I bet 4 or 5 will make the playoffs, because I think they truly undervalue the playoff lines with the teams when they first put out the numbers. They were so accustomed to the 4 teams and they made the adjustments. But when you look at if you take the top 2 teams, even if you're laying the juice with Georgia and Ohio State and Texas, I mean, you can lay the juice and you're going to win 4 out of 5 of those. So that's the value I found this year, was actually betting the yes, because they didn't know how to price out the 12-team playoffs. So a lot of yeses for me and not many no's because of the new scenario. So I'm going to just stick with what I have, wait to see how the season plays out, revisit what I think the odds should have been after the end of the year, and then we'll make our adjustments in the season 2.
I'm so glad you said that, Ralph, because I think there are people out there that are hesitant in laying a big minus price on something. But you're right. I don't think people can quite grasp that Georgia's going to have to go 8-4 to miss the playoff. Ohio State's going to have to lose to Michigan, Oregon, and Penn State to have an opportunity to miss the playoff. Like, you're going to see a total of 8 or 9 Big Ten and SEC teams in the playoff. And you're right. No, I don't think they really understood how short they should make these teams on the make. And the biggest bet that I have made in the preseason is I was able to bet at FanDuel a parlay to make the college football playoff, Ohio State and Georgia. They're both north of $5 to make it. It's almost $6, and that's minus 289 for those two teams who are in the preseason number 1 and number 2, and it's a virtual certainty that they're going to get in. So I laid 289 on the 2-team parlay that the 2 best teams in the country won't be outside the top 12 at the end of the year, and we'll see if I look good or if I look dumb if one of them have a bad year. But I certainly like my chances of winning that one.
Yeah, I think to win it all was close to even money with those two, and just to make the playoffs, you said is minus 280. The 12 yeah. I would argue that Ohio State at 9-3 should make it over Missouri at 10-2, right? Because the schedule is just that much harder for Ohio State than Missouri, and so that's kind of what the whole head scratcher is about all this. But great stuff, guys. Great point, Ralph. Because I don't think they priced it correct in the beginning. Now, if I was going to go with a no, there's 2 teams that kind of come to mind just based on the prices. One is Texas, and Texas. I guess the theme of this whole show for me that you'll notice is I don't really love teams that switch conferences the first year. I'm not going to love that, and we'll talk more about that. But Texas now lost 2 running backs. They just have a tendency to choke at some of the big games, and you scratch your head like, what is Quinn Ewers doing? You know, and I can see that happening again in a much harder situation, in a much harder super conference like the SEC. In Oregon, because the no is around the plus 250, plus 275 range. Not that it's because it's even money, but Oregon's in the same situation, and everyone loves Oregon. Everybody I listen to loves Oregon. And you know what?
Easy.
It is easy, but it's just a situation where they're going into a new area, lots of travel, a lot farther travel, a Big Ten that, as bad as, some of those Big Ten West teams, the Nebraskas, the Wisconsins, the Iowas have been, they're not going to take them too kindly coming into their court, coming into their field. And I think that they're going to be played hard. And I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying if I was going to bet the no, I did not bet the no on any teams right now. We'll wait to see if some of these get juiced a little higher. Any comment on that, Chris?
Yeah, I actually would consider betting the no on 2 teams. I would consider betting the no on Florida State, and I would consider betting the no on Michigan. Every year, I like your Texas thought, because if you look at the schedule, they didn't get any favors from the schedule maker at all in terms of having Georgia the week after the Red River game against Oklahoma. We saw last year Texas played a game against Houston the week after the big Red River game, and they barely survived against a really bad Houston team. Now to have to face the best team in the country the week after an emotional, physical game against your biggest rival, like, that's a problem. But I think if you look at Florida State and you look at Michigan, every year there's a team in the preseason top 10 that winds up falling flat. And I think those are the 2 teams that are most likely to this year. In the case of Florida State, are we sure DJ Uiagalelei is a Power 4 quarterback? He wasn't great last year at Oregon State. The last time we saw him at Clemson, he was terrible and getting benched. The Noles have, 10 total starters coming back, and only 4 from that defense. You got to go to Miami. You got a tricky opener in Dublin against Georgia Tech. The Florida game at the end of the year could still be a losable game. Like, there are enough pitfalls on that Florida State schedule where it would not surprise me if you're looking at a 9-3 team, and 9-3 in the ACC is not going to get you in. And in the case of Michigan, obviously you've got all of the off the field stuff going on. But again, how many starters did they lose on the line and from that great defense from last year? I'm not sure they're set at the quarterback position. Who are the go-to guys at wide receiver now? I think if you look at Michigan, I would expect them to lose to Oregon. I would expect them to lose to Texas. I would expect them to lose to Ohio State. And 9-3 is not going to. 9-3 is likely not going to get them in the college football playoff if indeed they do lose their 3 biggest games of the year.
100%. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty low on Michigan. It's hangover year, man. They got rid of everybody. Harbaugh's gone. Harbaugh took a bunch of coaches with him. They're still celebrating their national championship, in my opinion. Now, obviously the coach is going to come in there and, Sharon Moore he's going to try to motivate them up. They're the champs, man. It's not like they're a champ that comes every year and is more expected, like the Ohio States, like the Bamas and Georgias and those teams. So, yeah, I expect a massive fall off this year. And we'll get to that when we talk about the Big Ten. Let's talk about some futures then, unless you got any comment, Ralph, on those teams not making it.
No, the only other team I agree with the Michigan, and the only other team that I think is in for a battle is Utah. I mean, you look at the Big 12. I mean, I'm going to talk about taking a flyer with Iowa State. Oklahoma State comes back loaded. I like Kansas State over Utah. I'm high on Arizona. I mean, what those kids did after losing their coach, with the Saban effect and DeBoer going there, and then the Arizona coach going them, and them having to sign, the San Jose State coach. But, they have a dynamic duo, a quarterback and wide receiver, and they actually just got the team together. There were 5 teams that played in the same high school in Southern California, including maybe the best wide receiver in football. And they convinced everybody to stay, even though they had a coach loss late in the season. You never have that happen. Usually when a coach leaves in January, it's a mass exodus. So I'm really high on that Arizona team. So I'm going to throw Utah in the mix just because it is a 5 top-heavy Big 12 where they can just start knocking each other out. The Big 12, everyone may have 3 losses, and they may only have 1 team this year, the way they're top-heavy.
Because you mentioned that, Ralph, I will say I did bet at DraftKings, they have the props on teams, number of teams from a conference to make the playoff, and it was minus 150, but I did bet it. I bet the under 1.5 in the Big 12 because you're exactly right. There are like 7 or 8 teams from that league that are essentially identical. They're all going to knock. It's a deep league now. Don't have a great team. They just got a lot of good teams, and it's like this mishmash of Pac-12, AAC, old Big 12 teams that I don't see anybody winning 10 games in that league. Certainly maybe 1, but certainly not 2. And if it's going to take at least 10 wins from that league to get in.
No question.
Oh, geez, we just covered the Big 12 already. Can you believe it?
I didn't get to talk about a team from the Big 12, so we'll save that for later.
I know. But that is an amazing point because I had that written down, but here we are. You're absolutely right. The Big 12 is they're going to beat the heck out of each other, and that might open up some, maybe some prices and some of the lower teams that might be able to have a chance. We can always hedge too. Remember, these are to get a lot of these bets are to get to the conference championship game, get to the playoffs and things like that. But either way, let's start with the American Athletic Conference here. And, some changes obviously in these smaller conferences, but what do you have, Ralph, in the American Athletic Conference, or did you get to that one yet?
I got bits and pieces, and I really like this UTSA team. They are their season win total is 8 minus 135. I also am a fan of East Carolina over 5.5 wins at minus 150. So those are my top 2 in the conference. And one thing I want to point out is this. We're going to talk about season win totals or winning the conference. You got to make sure with this modern day and age of all these outs, do not have the concept in your mind that I like UTSA to win the division. So if you like them, then let's pick them to also look at their season win total. Look at, the other bets that you can have that you may want to split that bet or double up on that bet if you really like it. So like when I talk UTSA over 8 wins at minus 135, if that's your mentality, then you certainly have to look at putting a price on them to win the AAC as well, which I did. So those are my 2, not surprise teams, but 2 teams that I really do like to overachieve this year in the conference.
No, those are great. And UTSA finally lost Harris, their quarterback, but they seem to do okay in the transfer portal. And they've been powerful last year. They first year in the conference was last year, coming from Conference USA. Chris, what about you? What do you have in the American?
This was Ralph mentioned one of the teams that I took a flyer on to win the league in East Carolina. I think Houston there. I think this is kind of a year they've been building towards. They're going to need to be better defensively. But I think ECU, they're good coach. I think the way that the team is built this year, like 20-1. If you're looking for a real long shot to win the league, I think they're right there. The team I like is Rice. I'm not sold on Memphis being head and shoulders above everybody else in this conference. I think defensively they have a ton of problems. I don't get why they are so short in this league. They're going to have to be better defensively to slow down some of the offenses here, and would not surprise me to see Memphis pick up a couple of losses. But yeah, I played Rice over their season win total, and I played Rice to win the conference at around 16-1 as well. Mike Bloomgren has kind of been building this program along, and the school has been patient with him. You bring in E.J. Warner, the quarterback from Temple, now to help boost the offense, and they should score some more.
Kurt Warner's son, I believe.
Correct. It is, and I think defensively they're going to be okay. Schedule-wise is fine, but I think Rice over 6.5, Rice to win the league is worth a play. And I mentioned Temple. I know, Ralph, you said last year the win total was 2.5 on Temple. Well, it's 2.5 again this year. And if you look at the schedule, like I don't know who they're beating. If you look at like the Athlon preseason preview, they are 130th today. There are not more than 130 somewhat teams in the league. Like if you look at the schedule, like I don't know where they're winning a game. Coastal Carolina at home, no. Utah State at home, maybe, because they got a ton of problems. Army, they're probably not going to beat. At UConn, Tulsa, no. At ECU, at Tulane, FAU, no. At UTSA and North Texas, if they win 3 games and they beat me, fine. But this is a bad team that's going to struggle mightily now on offense without Warner at quarterback. So I know it's kind of tough to, oh my God, 2.5. I mean, they can go 3-9, but you look at their non-conference and you look at the way the schedule breaks down. This is not a good team. They might be, I shouldn't say might, they're one of the worst 5 teams in the country.
Yeah, I just shared.
Yeah, and you look at their schedule, Chris, like you said, they're going to be a double-digit dog in 8 games, and I have them at approximately +6 at home against Army, +3 at UConn, +3 at home against Tulsa, and +5 against Florida Atlantic. So, you've got to pull 3 upsets of a dog of a field goal or more. Again, those are based on my power ratings. Those aren't actual bettable lines for the Temple team. And, the thing about Temple is this. I mean, if Warner's on another team, it's not a big deal. But Warner had to have a fantastic game for Temple to win. And now without him there, I mean, they just have no chance. I mean, at least he could fire around and put up 300-yard games on occasion and get him close and keep him in some games. Yeah, I agree with you. Temple may be winless this year.
Yeah, I just looked at my screen too for Temple, and I have 1.57 wins. And this is taking it by percentage from my power ratings. And obviously you take all their weekly games and then to assign the percentage to it, and literally 1.57 games. So you're right. I'm pretty low on Temple myself, but I was surprised to see how low I was because I didn't even look at that for them this season. So I might be joining you on that. That makes total sense. As far as doing your power ratings and looking at the schedule, that's what it's all about. It's like you assign a probability with the spread that's going to be on every single game, and then you add it up and you get to 1.57 according to my power ratings anyway. But it sounds like we agree. So I love that one. So I did take East Carolina, guys, as well. I didn't get 5.5. I got like a flat 6, but I was okay with that. And I think that East Carolina just has a lot going for them. Like you said, Mike Houston, very good chance. And Ralph, what I do is I put double the amount at least on the over their wins, and I do less on the future. So I'm winning anyway. Say they don't make it there, I still get my win total bet, and I'll just give up whatever I put on the future. But a new offense coordinator, John David Baker, comes from Ole Miss. And he's going to get one of these transfer quarterbacks going, in my belief. I think it's going to be Jake Garcia or Caitlin Hauser. I'm not sure which one is going to really come out. Maybe he knows by now. But there's no Tulane on their schedule. There's no Memphis on their schedule. And there's no South Florida on their schedule. I'm pretty high on, too. I put a little sprinkle on South Florida to make it as well. I'm kind of bullish on them. But, yeah, I totally agree with you, and I'm in the same boat for the American Athletic Conference there. So, Conference USA. Let's talk about Conference USA next. And this is the one I have the very long shot on. So I'm I might as well go first. I know Liberty, and they stick out above them. They got more money than a lot of these schools, and they've invested a lot more. But still, man, they went through it last year, and I just don't like a lot of teams there. I don't like FAU, and because of that, I'm taking a little bit of a shot at UTEP. I took UTEP higher over the 4 wins at -120, but they're 65-1 to win Conference USA. So I put a small bet on them. What I like about them is that they have a new coach named Scotty Walden that comes from Austin Peay. He won 9 games last year in the FCS. He took with him a bunch of transfers. They got 2 solid quarterbacks there in Cade McConnell and Kyle Locklear. I just feel like this is the chance for the guy to kind of come in and possibly make a splash. Now, the 60-1 thing, maybe it doesn't happen. I do win on the season wins, but I can always hedge out of that too if they're playing Liberty in the final game, Ralph.
Yeah, if I had to pick a flyer, I have bet nothing in CUSA. So let me clarify that. And the closest I was to betting Western Kentucky at +450. It's not bad when you're getting +450 for the second team in the conference. The problem is I have Liberty a touchdown better than Western Kentucky, Jacksonville State. FIU, I think, is even improving. So it's tough to take a 10-point team now. The advantage is this. You look at Liberty, and the next best 2 teams are clearly Western Kentucky and Jacksonville State. Well, what do you know? Liberty gets them both at home. So that's the reason I'm not going to try to find a team to bet against, because with them having both of those foes at home, I expect them to be a 10 and 11-point favorite. I don't want to lay it with Liberty in case something happens because they're too big of a favorite. But this is a situation where I'm just going to sit back, listen to Chris, because I'm not going to try to make of a play that there's nothing there that I have any interest in betting.
Well, I made one play in Conference USA. Again, this was a conference I didn't spend a ton of time on. And it's kind of a playback from a play that I had last year and lost. I played FIU under their win total last year. I think it was 3.5. I played them under 4.5 again this year. I think they lost a lot of pieces. And a wide receiver transfer to Colorado. Their best offensive lineman left. Their 2 best defensive players left. They won a couple of games early on. Like, how the hell did they do that? Which is how they got to 4. They started 3-1. And then the rest of the year, they got absolutely bombed. The defense fell apart, and they couldn't stop a nosebleed. So, again, could they improve this year? But under 4.5, the schedule to win 5 when you're not going to win at Indiana week 1. Central Michigan, you're probably not going to beat them week 2. At FAU, a rival, week 3. You'll probably beat Monmouth, and then you got your Conference USA schedule where they do go to Liberty. So at least that's a plus where you're not wasting a home game against the best team in the league who's going to beat you. So still 5 to beat me with FIU. Under 4.5 was the play for me.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. They're still one of my worst teams, bottom 10 in my power ratings as well. And Indiana is going to be difficult. Like you said, at Liberty. We'll even see if New Mexico State rebounds. So, yeah, I have no disagreement with that one. Let's move on to a much bigger conference in the MAC. We have some interesting teams in the MAC this year. I have another medium shot in this one, but I'll let Chris go first and see what he has.
I honestly have nothing here. As I said earlier, I have not really digested this league. The 2 things that I have heard, 3 things I have heard from people. I have heard a lot of support for Akron under. I have heard a good bit of support for Ball State over. And I've heard a good bit of support for Miami of Ohio to win the league. So those are the 3 things that I have heard from people that I respect. I have not dove in with my own thoughts and projections and numbers there for the MAC, but if you're looking for something here and just stumbling upon this, those are 3 things that I heard that I'm going to look into from people that I respect.
Well, Ralph knows his MAC, being from Ohio. What about you, Ralphie?
Well, I did the Ohio team, so I didn't do the Michigan teams and the Buffaloes yet. But I'm going to say this: I have 3 win totals written down, and 2 of them I'm likely to bet. Bowling Green over 6 wins at -125. Toledo under 8.5 wins at -130. And while I think Miami wins the conference, I think there's some value with BG at +700. And there's just times that, you get a team that maybe is the third or fourth best team in the conference, and they've been crappy for so long. They sometimes, they don't get priced where they should be because bookmakers laying odds to get even money on everyone, not where they think the odds should be. So I actually think Bowling Green at +700 was is a nice long shot to take. And obviously, again, it's correlated with me liking over 6 wins, Toledo under. But again, I think it's a 4-team race. You got Miami, Toledo's still going to be good. Northern Illinois is greatly improved, and then Bowling Green.
I'm on Bowling Green, so there you go. Glad to align with that one. Yeah, I think they have some pretty good returning production. Connor Bazelak is back at quarterback. This team's been in the doldrums for some years, but they really did well. They won 5 of their last 6 games. Their only loss of their last 6 games was against the champion Toledo, and they lost by 1 point. That was a heck of a nail biter game last year, Ralph. And this year, I think they have the schedule to be able to do it. Now, I think Miami, Ohio is still my favorite team in the division, but looking at +750, I think there's some value there.
I'm looking at their schedule right now, Kiev. Sorry to cut you off because I'm intrigued by this. I wonder, and I both of you, I'm throwing this out there just as a conversation point. You look at their early schedule, the fact that they play at Penn State and at Texas A&M early in the year, 2 games that they're going to lose. You would think. Do you think that would have any effect on the market to win the MAC, or are the odds makers just smart enough to just completely ignore what happens in those 2 games?
What if they do good?
Could you, in theory, if they're +750 to win the MAC and they lose those 2 games, could you maybe get 8-1 or something like that?
Probably, and they'd have to get blown out, which you'd expect it. But what if they fight hard at Texas A&M, because that's the risk. Yeah, because they're thinking about the Notre Dame win they just had or something. I don't know, and maybe that's the week after. But that's
there's something else you have to remember, guys, is that I remember ULM like 10 years ago. They had to play like 4 Power 5 teams every year just to fill their coffers with money, and they had a horrendous schedule. And he just laid down and didn't even play. Sometimes when you have these mid-major coaches that have these back-to-back games, they do have a bye between Penn State and A&M. There are some times that mid-major coaches just lay down and play very vanilla if they have an important conference game on deck. A lot of times we think of the opposite way. Oh, will this team be focused on playing a MAC team? But it works the opposite way. When you have a Sun Belt team and they may be playing a SEC team with a Sun Belt game on deck, those are the type of situations that also work in reverse with the lower conferences.
I am such a fan of that. Like I can remember, I can remember it happening against Alabama. I can't remember who the team was. It maybe it was a South Carolina team. It wasn't Coastal Carolina. It was someone else who recently maybe Charleston Southern, I think it was. That may have played Alabama recently, or South Carolina. It was someone who played South Carolina where they basically were getting annihilated, and the coach was like, "I'm not going to risk my guys getting hurt and going out to win a league in the FCS or wherever the hell we are, where we know we're not going to win there. I don't want this loss to hinder the rest of my season." So I wish more coaches were, again, and is it fair to the backups who maybe aren't as good as the starters to go out there? But at the same time, I think when the FBS coach sees that, they're like, okay, this is an opportunity for my backups to play as well. So there's a bit of a give and take there, but I wish more non-AQ and FCS type schools would realize that and be like, hey, we're not going to win this game. We're there for the check. I'm going to play my starters a little just so they can say, hey, we got to play in Happy Valley, or we get to play at Kyle Field, and then come on out and we'll focus on winning the MAC.
Yeah, I agree with that. And all of a sudden, if their starters just start doing good and maybe they hang, I think playing those power teams, just these kids are all the same age as those guys. They kind of think to themselves, well, it's time for me to step up a little bit. I almost kind of reward these teams that play them anyway, just because, they're coming out and just feeling like, hey, I just played the same guy my age, and I want to play better. And I just feel like that's a underrated thing as well. They just face some really good teams. And I've seen college teams do that, and all of a sudden they look awesome when they come to their division. So great point about getting a better number, Chris. That could possibly happen. Be looking at that. And, it's just like betting preseason football. After the starter scores the touchdown, fade the heck out of the live number. It's another good little situation. By the way, Brad Powers was on this about a month ago. We both took under Toledo, under 8.5. Jason Candle doesn't return anybody there. And he's not too high on Candle as a coach. I'm a little bit higher than Brad, but this was a big one that we both took under.
You're also talking to a BG guy. He hates everything about the
BG.
That's true. Yeah, we'll forget about that. All right, well, Mountain West time. We'll just blow through this one. I mean, it's Boise State or nobody really for me, but if I'm going to take a little bit of a win total, I did take Colorado State over 6 wins for a little bit, and I'll put a little sprinkle on them to win the Mountain West at 15-1. I just think it's finally Jade Norvell's year, going into his 3rd year. Everyone was kind of high on him his first 2 years, but maybe we were just on him the wrong year. Fought really hard against Colorado last year, and they get to host Colorado this year. Holy cow, that's gonna be fun. That game's gonna be better than people think. And they also they did beat Boise State last year. Colorado State beat Boise State last year in a very strange spot, and they have good returning offense and defense. They got to shore up that defense, but the passing game should be good with Braden Fowler Nicolosi as the starter. And they actually avoid Boise State in the regular season. They get Wyoming at home. Fresno became more interesting now that they lost Tedford. So maybe they're down a little bit. So, I just thought the window might have cracked a little bit for Colorado State. Chris, what do you have?
Yeah, I don't have a play here in the Mountain West. However, I am going to. Well, I shouldn't say that. I had a play in the Mountain West, but it's one of those. I don't even want to say it because it's a past post and it's not anything that anybody is actionable right now. But the New Mexico-Montana state line moved dramatically. I got it at a much better number than it was now. But I am going to consider waiting on the Hawaii-UCLA game. There is so much talk about UCLA being down and a lot of people on Hawaii and it being a tricky game. And I know there was a group that bet it down to 12.5, and I think it's 13 now. I'm going to be curious if this number comes down a little bit more. But if this number comes down to 12 or 12.5 again against UCLA, I'm probably going to be on the Bruins in that game, which what is week 1 is then week 0 is Hawaii's opener. I think it is the week 0 game against Delaware State. But I think when UCLA goes out there for week 1, if that number comes down to under 13, I can see myself being on the Bruins because they're still better than what Timmy Chang's team has.
What about you, Ralphie?
This is like CUSA. I mean, to me, there's nothing else that I could find. But as Chris said, with some line movements, I actually laid 160 with Boise over 8.5 wins. I looked this morning. It is now 9 minus 150. So it moved a half point and 90 cents. So, again, you would push instead of win. But, you look at Boise's schedule. Again, these numbers are based on my power ratings. They're going to be let me pull up my schedule. What did I do with it? Okay, they're going to be a 25-point dog at Oregon. So we throw that out. The rest of the games, they're a favorite. They're a favorite of -3 or more in every game, and they're a double-digit favorite in 7 games. And their other toughest games, at home against Washington State after playing Portland State, a great spot. They go to UNLV as a 4-point favorite. They are off a bye. They go to Wyoming late in the season, and they host Oregon State at the end. I just think the schedule plays out perfect, and this is a situation where it is all chalk for me, and I can't find a reason to not say I think the chalk is good. So very few opportunities for me because I am that high on Boise State.
In talent-wise, with Malachi Nelson coming in from SC and Jonty the running back, like they have more talent than anybody else in this league, probably by a decent amount. It's just going to be a question whether or not Danielson's able to take that step as a head coach. I think his coordinators are good, and I think the fact that Avalos is gone, that got a lot of the bad taste out of that program because he was not well liked there and well received. But I think Dirk Hutter is the offensive coordinator. He's familiar with Boise and was there when they were getting going and becoming the team that they were. Yeah, I don't want to try and beat them in this league at all.
And one more thing, when you look at the Mountain West schedule, the top 4 teams are Boise, UNLV, Fresno, and Air Force. They avoid Fresno and Air Force. I mean, come on. How much do you want the schedule makers to set you up where you're the best team and you don't have to face 2 of the next 3 best teams? That's just why their schedule. I have Boise again that 25-point favorite, but on the theoretical win percentage, I have them over 9.2. And again, there's some situations because of the scheduling spot that I think it's still worth that value.
I don't know why people are high on Air Force, though. I mean, they won't return anybody this year. And I think they take a big
but they never do. It's the service academy. I know. You don't play young kids. Yeah. Well.
Not one offensive lineman. I hate it when service academies don't return their offensive line. Put it that way. Okay. Well, I think the interesting team is Fresno State because of the Tedford thing. And I believe it's Pat McCann taking over as their head coach. It's it was one of the coordinators. I couldn't remember. I wrote it down. But I'm not going to pull up my notes. But I have Boise State the number 1 team in this by at least a couple points. So I mean, I don't disagree with that at all. And then sometimes there is value on those minus 150s, like Ralph said. Sometimes those prices are wrong, and those are the sharp side. Who cares if you have to lay 150 to win 100 if there's value there? So we always got to think like that. Let's move on to the Sun Belt, the Fun Belt, and I believe this is the only conference that kept their divisions this year. But there's a lot of changes in the Sun Belt because James Madison completely kind of broke apart. Troy, their coach, and everybody broke apart at Troy, as well as South Alabama. So what about the Sun Belt, Ralph? Did you get a chance to look at this, or do you have anything from a possible future or season win total?
Color me a Bobcat. App State is App State, and they're going to be there. I like the Texas State team. I like McLeod at quarterback, and you have a running back as well that's an all-conference, and you've got a couple guys on defense. I look at their schedule, and it plays out favorable to me. You're going to be able to, I think in their division, you're going to be able to lose a game and still get there. So, they don't play App State. They do not play Marshall, the top 2 teams in the East. So I think Texas State does get there. And they're worth the risk to me to win the Sun Belt.
Chris.
I have heard a lot of Texas State, and I love Kenny, the head coach. I know people who are dialed into Tulsa who were very, very upset that they did not hire him as their head coach, and they hired Kevin Wilson instead, not hiring your former quarterbacks. He is not long for Texas State at all. I just have a hard time getting past App State. I think defensively, they're the best team. I think where they are with the skill positions, they're the best team in the Sun Belt. Again, is it cute? Is it fun? Is it fancy? No, but I do think they're the best team. They should be in the conference championship game from the East, probably against Texas State, and then we'll see from there. But yeah, I didn't have any other real gems of wisdom from this league.
Didn't they get 77 scored against them against Arkansas State last year? 77-31 was the score of that Texas State versus Arkansas State. I remember. I mean, getting the over by yourself by a lot was interesting. And the only reason I said that is because I hate to say this and I deserve to lose this, Ralph, but I actually took Arkansas State's over. And it was over 5.5. And Butch Jones Butch Jones, right? But I don't know. I've seen something different about him lately. And they just return a ton of production. I think they returned like 8 or 9 starters on offense, which is great. Now, the defense is where they stunk at, right? Well, I mean, if they can shore up that defense a little bit, I think they have some games that they're going to win. I got them beating Louisiana Monroe. I got them winning against Troy now that Troy's dismantled. I have them winning Central Arkansas in the beginning, probably a push against Tulsa at home. I think they get to a bowl game. So that's where I laid it. I think I laid a little bit of juice on that, but I think their schedule's easy enough. At Michigan's, they're really, non-conference loss. Oh no, there's two of them at Michigan and Iowa State. So I deserve to lose it if I do, but I'll stick with them. But I do both agree that, Texas State is probably the second team to bet under Appalachian State. I think Appalachian State is above them. This feels like the Mountain West to me. I feel like Boise State and App State are kind of the tops in their division. And Chris and I have a friend that thinks Texas State might make the playoffs. So we'll see. We'll see how that bet.
Yeah, I'm not going to go that far, but that's not. One thing we do have to mention, Kiev, because you talked about them getting thrashed, allowing 77 points. You do have to remember that they were plus 50 yards, and the reason they gave up 77 points is I think they had 6 turnovers, and they ended up minus 4 turnovers for the game. So you turn the ball over 4 times. Again, you put up 580 yards, and you had a 50-yard edge, and you give up 77 points. Welcome to college football.
Oh, without a doubt. It was a segue. It was a segue, man.
could we get behind a South Alabama under 6.5 at plus money? You lose your head coach. You lose your coordinators to Power 5 jobs. You're gutted by the portal. You're not going to go to App State and win. You're not going to go to LSU and win. Like, you go to Louisiana, who I know some people like in this league as well. Like, under 6.5 for South Alabama could potentially be a play at plus money that I might make here, as I'm just kind of looking for a little Sunbelt content here. That way I'm not leaving you high and dry.
I looking at the schedule and my power ratings, I actually have South Alabama favored in 10 games.
Really?
Yeah. Now, granted, they're only a 1-point favorite at Arkansas State, a 2-point favorite against Troy, a 1-point favorite at ULL, and a 2-point favorite. Now I will say this. These numbers were done in May, and I have not made any adjustments. I like doing adjustments one time, 2 weeks before the season. So these power ratings could change by, 3 or 4 points based on, the injuries. But I don't go in every time something happens because it's too hit and miss and you forget things. So I sort of just compile all the data. I go in right before the season. I make all my adjustments for the teams, and we'll see where they pan out. So there are a lot of close games there in the mix. So to me, it would be, that to me would be a South Alabama team to see. They play North Texas and Ohio to start the season. See what all those losses meant to the team. If they start off slow, that would be a situation, Chris, where I would wait to bet them under if they falter in those first 2 games and they truly are as bad as you believe they are.
Yeah, at Ohio is going to tell you a little bit. I have them at 6.68 wins, but the unders at plus money, under 6.5 at plus 125. So, I see what you're saying. 7's a little safer if you can find it, but maybe I could be talked into it. We'll watch them those first couple games and see if we're still getting those dealt to us by good Kings, who sent me an email this morning that was very strange about golf. But either way,
and just a reminder, when Chris was talking about betting them in the season, obviously a season win total goes down once they play their first game. But FanDuel, DraftKings, and a lot of places have conference win totals. So if you see an opportunity, you still have the opportunity to get an out on those. Don't think that the season started. Stop looking at season win totals. Reevaluate into September to see if you could find any value on a conference season win total as well.
Absolutely. And we will get into one of those conference season win totals starting with the ACC here. And what a perfect opportunity for me to jump into that, because I did take NC State over 5.5 conference wins. Now, am I high on NC State? I mean, to be honest with you, the ACC, you can make a lot of arguments for a decent amount of these teams. Chris's Miami's looking good. Clemson, Florida State reloads with the transfer portal. But, I'm not so sure about the non-conference because they got a tough game against Tennessee, right? And that was the one I was pretty worried about. And then, Louisiana Tech's a win. Western Carolina's a win. But, the big thing for me is that I think you're going to get 6 wins in the non-con because you got you or in the conference is what I'm trying to say. You got Wake Forest there. I think they're up for the taking this year. Wake Forest is looking bad. Stanford at home, Duke at home. At Georgia Tech could be a win. Even at North Carolina could be a win at the end. At Cal is going to be interesting. And then Syracuse at home, I think, is very possible. I look at their schedule, missing Florida State's nice, missing Miami's nice, and missing Virginia Tech's nice. So, yeah, I think they can get 6 conference wins, Chris.
Yeah, I think the problem I have with NC State is it just feels like they're a program that they're a perennial 8-4 team, 9-3 max every single year. It just feels like a team that they can't get through to that 10-win type conference championship type contender. So I see what you're saying there with NC State. I just can't quite get all the way there with the Wolfpack.
Okay, well, Ralph, do you have, or Chris, I should ask you, do you have something in the ACC actionable?
I have a lot of things in the ACC. And again, months ago, I played Syracuse over 6.5. That is no longer available. But what I did play recently, and you're not going to like this, I don't think, is I played Syracuse in a head-to-head against Wisconsin in terms of season wins. I played Syracuse minus 105, more wins than Wisconsin. I think the fact that I think Fran Brown hire is a net plus for Syracuse. I think getting Gadsden back after he missed almost all of last year is back. I think McCord will go there with a lot less pressure, and he'll have a good season there. And I think the schedule will allow for them to have a good season, whereas with Wisconsin, like, you've got USC, Rutgers, Iowa, Nebraska on the road, and that doesn't even account for Alabama, Penn State, and Oregon at Camp Randall. Like, what do we think we're going to get from Tyler Van Dyke? Is it the Tyler Van Dyke that was seeing ghosts last year and was benched, or is it the Tyler Van Dyke that showed so much promise as a freshman? So I played Syracuse minus 105, more wins than Wisconsin. And I played Iowa State more wins at plus 160 than Virginia Tech. I know Ralph alluded to the Cyclones earlier. I think they are in store for a very big year in Ames with all the players that they have coming back. And while I'm high on Virginia Tech, I just don't know. You got road games at Miami and Syracuse. You got Clemson and Rutgers visiting Lane. Like, it feels like 8 is the ceiling if everything goes right for Virginia Tech, even with Drones at quarterback. So I would look at Iowa State at a nice plus price, more wins than the Hokies. And I did play a little Miami to win the ACC, just because I think inside that building, I do think they privately think that they're going to be pretty good. I initially, with my alumni pessimism, was not like down with them. But I think you bring in Ward, you bring in Damian Martinez, you bring in Sam Brown, you bring in Tyler Barron, you bring in a bunch of guys on the defensive side of the ball. Like, outside of Ole Miss and Ohio State, like, nobody did more in the portal and in paying for player acquisition than Miami and their collective. So it's been a while since they won 10 games. That game at Florida week 1 is very scary with all the offseason hype, but you can lose to Florida and still win the ACC. So I did put a little bit there on my alma mater to win the ACC, just in case they are as good as I think they privately think they are.
Well, I hope Tyler Van Dyke's parents aren't watching this podcast.
Yeah, no.
Well, you left Miami. As a Badger fan, the best thing I can hope for is him to be the Bo Nix from Auburn with a bad coach, and then all of a sudden maybe
he will. Maybe he will.
To be honest with you, what you said against Syracuse, I just looked and I have them both at exactly 7.23 wins. It's really weird that I got within the hundredths of a point here, and I have both Wisconsin and Syracuse here at 7.23 wins. But what I will say,
minus 105 each way.
right. But this also means I'm not that high on Wisconsin, and we'll get to the Big Ten. But I'm curious what Klubnik's gonna, or not Klubnik. What's his face from Ohio State that's starting for Syracuse? What's the
McCord?
McCord, yeah, Kyle McCord, yeah. He feels like a Kate Klubnik to me, but yeah, Kyle McCord, I just kind of feels, is he going to come in with a big chip on his shoulder? I think he should.
You will.
Syracuse has a new coach this year. Syracuse is one of those big question mark teams that I have. So I'm a little bit higher on Virginia Tech. I sprinkled them at 12-1 to win the ACC, and I think some of the reasons that I like them, well, for one thing, they finished well last year and won a bunch of their last games. They dumped those teams here to win 3 out of their last 4. With the portal ranking 23rd on 3 net rankings, I do like that on 3 site that ranks at net. They're 0.9 net yards per play last year. What sucks is I feel like everybody's on Virginia Tech, Chris, and you know, and it sucks. I also took Cal over 5.5 wins at -132 for a half star. I think they go bowling. You know, they avoid Louisville, they avoid Clemson, they avoid Miami, and they avoid Virginia Tech. You know, I think they just got that hard game at Florida State, and I'd rather have them go there than have to lose that one at home kind of thing. So I think this is kind of like that little surprise Pac-12 team that's going to have the chip on their shoulders, you know, coming in. In general, I'm not high on teams transferring, as I mentioned before. Ralph, what do you have for the ACC?
I got a question for you guys before. Do you apt not to use overs for a first-year head coach?
In general, I would say in general, unless now,
if it's a new head coach, I normally don't. I sort of just leave the team out, mark who I like. If it's a coach that coached at another team and got hired, that's a different scenario for me. When we have a brand new head coach, I tend to just not even look at overs. So I just wanted to throw that out to see if you guys thought that at all or put that into your thought process.
Yeah, no, that's something I really hadn't thought of a ton, but I guess my big macro would be you're bringing in a new coach who's going to try something different, and there's the reason he's there, and the different may be a good thing, and maybe you have an opportunity of getting a season win total, buying it on the cheap and getting a half a game or something where over might be the worthwhile play. But yeah, I see both ends of the argument.
Well, taking into context, was the team a terrible team when Lance Leopold went to Kansas? You know, I mean, that was a clear upgrade in coaching. But, you know, we're going to get into one with Kalen DeBoer going to Alabama here in the SEC that I have some thoughts on. But, you know, in general, if they were a decent team, I feel it's more of a honeymoon year, I guess, for the new coach. I actually kind of think that for the pros too, a little bit too, but mostly for college. So I'm with you. But go ahead on that.
I have 3 overs in the ACC. I did lay juice on 2 of them. I played SMU over 7.5 wins, -160. And I played Virginia Tech over 7.5 wins, -160 as well. So I was a little late to the Virginia Tech party by the time I got down to them. But again, I'm not afraid to play a line if it moves. If that line had opened up and I still like the game, it's still going to be a play to me. I don't mind that someone else got a better number to me, but you have to have a value in your head. And once it gets past that value, just leave it off. There's better money to be had. And then I did use Miami over 9 wins at -125. I look at their schedule. I mean, their schedule lines up great. They're going to be a favorite in 10 games. They're going to be a favorite of 7 or more in 9 games. So if you just win all 9 games as a touchdown favorite, you at least push. The other games, -2 at Florida, +2 at Louisville, and home against Florida State, which is basically going to be a pick 'em. So yes, I'm counting on them to win one of those Florida, Louisville, and Florida State games, but I think they win the rest of them. And, you know, Miami to me always seemed to disappoint, but, you know, we're now into another year of Cristobal, you know, with returning, you know, with 15 returning starters, you know, and again, you avoid Clemson, you get Florida State at home. It's a situation where I do like the Hurricanes.
The Cam Ward thing was so interesting to see him those first games, 5 or 6 games, and then they just lost a ton in a row. And it almost made me feel like, is Cam Ward the guy that when he's undervalued or just, you know, ignored, they're the dog, he shows up, but then all of a sudden when expectations get high, does that change? I don't know. I guess the one thing that makes me better is that he played really tough against Washington, that final Apple Cup. So I suppose the optimism really relies there where Cam Ward going to Miami. It's really hard for me to get over the coach there. Mario Cristobal. I feel like week one is interesting as hell against Florida, and I feel like there's more pressure on Miami, Chris.
Yeah, there's totally. It's a horrible position for Miami. Like you are hyped. You are expected to go to an in-state rival, an SEC team on its home field and win week one after an off season of expectations. All Florida has been hearing about is Sunbelt Billy and the joke about how they're terrible and they're going to win 4 games and he's going to get fired and they stink. And you look at the number and the number suggests that it's a toss-up type game. It's only a 2-point spread. Miami hasn't won a road game against a non-conference opponent like this big in a hell of a long time. And there's a ton of pressure on Miami. Like I'm in a big group text with a bunch of sicko Miami fans, and like they're saying like this is the biggest game for Miami like in a long time, just because of the state bragging rights, the expectation. If you win, everything's on the table. If you lose, it's like, oh no, here we go again. So no, it's a terrible spot for Miami to go to. But if you win, then it's like, oh, okay. I made the example to the 2001 team, which all of off season it was like, okay, Miami got screwed in 2000. They should have been in the title game. They weren't. Now they're the best team. They're going to win. And you went to Penn State in that night game, and you were an okay size favorite. I think it was under a touchdown. And it was like, are they going to be that good? And they absolutely went out and destroyed Penn State and set the table for that unbelievable season. So could we see a situation like that again where maybe they do perform and maybe they do go on the road and beat a big name team? But I'm no outcome for Miami from 9-3, 11-1 ACC champ, make college football playoff would surprise me. Anything in between there is on the table.
Anything in between makes sense. All right. Let's talk about the Big Ten. And this conference obviously got a lot bigger. 18 teams in it now, just like I believe, well, the ACC 17, I believe. The Big 12 is 16, I want to say. So yeah, they're a massive size conference, obviously adding the 4 teams. And the Big Ten, we already mentioned a little bit about the Badgers. The cat's out of the bag with the Badgers. I don't know what to expect either. And the truth is Van Dyke is hit or miss. There's some teams I can't get a beat on. I'm just staying away from them. You know, we don't got to bet your teams that you like. You don't got to necessarily fade them if you think they have a shot. I'm going to take Indiana over 5.5 wins. And I got that early before it was juiced. I took it on July 14th. But this team was so awful last year. And what do you think, Chris? What do you think James Madison would have done against, let's just say, a Mississippi State or maybe even like an Iowa or a Minnesota? Yeah, don't you think they would have hung with those kind of teams last year?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, now Indiana became James Madison. You know, they literally became James Madison. They took their coach and 18 transfers, and it's not like
they lost someone. They lost the starting offensive lineman today, right? I think I read that one of the starting linemen is out, got hurt.
I missed it.
How much it really matters.
I missed it, and we'll see how that comes to fruition with injuries. Better than a quarterback, I guess. But bringing in 18 guys from JMU when JMU would have been power rated pretty dang close to some of these middling Big Ten type teams makes me think that Indiana is going to go over 5.5, and they are James Madison. I almost got to turn them into James Madison. And there's another team that kind of did this. I'll talk about later, but their power rating has to go above 0 for me. And above average, I should say. They're plus 1.2 net yards per play last year. They avoid Penn State. They avoid Oregon. They avoid USC. They avoid Wisconsin and Iowa. They have an amazing schedule. And I think, when we talk about scheduling, it sucks as the Badgers because they always could just have to win a few games to get into the Big Ten championship game. Now without the divisions, this makes it great for Indiana. This makes it great for Rutgers. This makes it great for Michigan State, right? And Maryland. Now they don't have to play Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan every single year. And I feel like Indiana is just another one of those teams that was blessed and they're the new James Madison, and they're going to be shocking some people, guys. What do you think, Ralph?
I'll just say, you know, I can't disagree with Randy.
Drop the hammer on you here, my friend.
I am just not nearly on him like you are. And, you know, while obviously, you know, when you look at the Big Ten East, yeah, the Big Ten East teams were happy they got rid of the divisions to get rid of Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. But, you know, there's so many other good teams in there. It really is important to, when you're looking at win totals and win the divisions, who you're playing and who you're not. My biggest bet for the future was Penn State at -140 to make the college football playoff. To me, it is. I didn't look to see what the number was. I bet 140. I bet it for 3 times any other future I bet. You know, you get Ohio State at home, likely for a whiteout. If you lose to them, no big deal. You don't play Oregon. You're going to beat everybody else. You're making the playoff. Yeah, you know, so I will throw that out. I did use Northwestern under 5.5 wins, -140, and Rutgers over 5.5 wins. So those are 2 smaller ones I made. And I actually I want to throw out a week 1 bet I made, which sounds like I'm crazy. So let's see. We have a Heisman quarterback that was on a team 2 years ago against playing a team that had a Heisman winner yesterday. And they both had defenses that ranked about 120 last year in the FBS in USC and LSU. I think they were combined, 24-1 to the over-under. I actually like under 62.5 in the opening week in Vegas. You look at what their defenses did. You look at them having to count on the rush attack. And I just went to the database with this. You know, you look at week 1 totals of 58.5 or higher are 109 and 175, 62% to the under. And if both teams are FBS teams and there's a total of 58.5 or higher, they're actually 64% to the under in the last 12 years. So, you know, to me, it's a situation where I think everyone thinks USC, LSU, such bad defenses. Well, you know what? Those coordinators are so tired of hearing about those bad defenses. And I think you adjust your game plan starting the season. And I'm going to throw in one just ATS stat. You know, we know James Franklin covers more than any coach. He loves to keep his alumni happy. James Franklin, if you get James Franklin, every game since 2014, you are 95 and 66, 59% against the spread. If you bet him as a favorite of -7 and higher, you're 54 and 27, 67%. And if you bet James Franklin the last 3 years as a favorite up to 24. So he's got a chance for a front door cover. He is 18-2-1, 90% against the spread at Penn State. As a favorite up to -24.
Last 3 years, favorite up to 24 points, 18-2-1.
They were a 35 or 40 point favorite that he didn't cover. He doesn't care about that on the front door covers. But yeah, 18-2-1 as a favorite for Franklin. So just some random numbers to throw out to you when you're watching Penn State.
Throw them out there. Well, I love that, and I'm with you. Like,
great numbers.
Biggest bet in the Big Ten that I made was the exact same bet you did. I had 142, so you beat me by a couple of pennies. But everything that you said, a new coordinator. We'll see if Koltonicki can get Drew Aller to stop checking down to his tight ends every play. You bring in Julian Fleming at wide receiver. I know Manny Diaz is gone, but Tom Allen, who's familiar with the conference from Indiana, he's the defensive coordinator. We hit on the schedule. There wasn't a team out there in the Power 4 leagues that benefited from the conference realignment and playoff expansion more than Penn State. You go back like the last 8 years, 6 times Penn State would have been in the top 12 on selection day. So, like, this is perfect for them. I love Penn State to make the playoff. And you hit on something with LSU and USC. You got new coordinators for both of these teams. Danton Lane, who is at UCLA, is now with SC. Blaine Baker, who was at Missouri, is now in Baton Rouge. So, yeah, you can bet that those two guys are going to be a little bit fiery in their practices and preparation for this team and looking for their teams to show some immediate dividends.
And the Missouri DC at LSU is the highest paid coordinator in college football this year. So we saw the job he did at Missouri. He's going to have more talent at LSU to do it. And again, I think there's just going to be a meld that the offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators are going to get together to come up with a game plan that helps the team overall, run the ball more, slow the clock down. So, again, that is a play that I actually bet and gave out to my clients in that USC LSU play.
Isn't it going to go to 65, though? I mean, people are going to look at this thing at the last week. I almost feel like the betting public's going to move it. Am I wrong? Is it just going to be a sharper side that goes under? I mean,
that's a very good point. But again, I felt a number I was comfortable with, so I will play it. And, you know, if I get burned on it, that's fine. But when you're studying in the summer, you know, if you're using the entire summer to work on projects, you got to believe that you're as smart as the people making the line. So you have to decide where you would make the line. If there's value, take advantage then. If you get burned, you get burned. But for most astute gamblers that are in this business, you're going to get the best line more times by betting it early than later.
Yeah, that's the thing, because I'm trying to sit here and think of the narrative going into that game. Is it the fact that these two teams brought in defensive coordinators who are looking to improve on the defenses from last year? Or is it that you've got two teams looking to replace the two Heisman winning quarterbacks? You got Miller Moss, who was great in the bowl game, and Lincoln Riley is an offensive coach. And you got Nussmeier, who was great in the bowl game, and they got a flock of young wide receivers as well. I'm curious where that number, the total, is going to go. I'm going to look and see, and hopefully it will. Not that I want you to have a bad number out, but I'd be curious if it goes up a little bit, and I'll be right there with you on the under for sure. I want to throw one more contrarian Big Ten play out that I made. I played Iowa under 8. I've heard so much Iowa love out there. New coordinator. And remember, this is still the same bad offensive players that they have. I know Lester is in. I mean, Cade McNamara was there's a reason he transferred out of Michigan and got beat out. And now he wasn't. I mean, it's only a couple of scrimmages, but he hasn't been great so far. I wonder, too, if like this new offense like kind of affects the defense. If indeed they do start moving the ball a little bit more, does that kind of cause an effect on the defense, or maybe they're on the field a little bit more and they're not as good as they've been in the past? Like, look, Iowa, if they go 9-3 and they beat me, fine. But I thought Iowa under 8, if you're looking to be a little bit of a contrarian here, might be a way to go.
Well, they lost their best player in Torrey Taylor, you know, their punter. So,
correct.
You know,
Field position,
something you're going to worry about.
One.
They won all their one-score games except one against Minnesota. So, you know, that's usually one of those
keep doing
regression candidates. You know, Iowa's tough on me. I do think the fact that they did get a new offensive coordinator is interesting. I don't know, but you look at these new offensive coordinators and you have to wonder if the coach is still going to let him coordinate. You know, you wonder if Ferentz is going to let him do it. He's going to be like, no, keep my defense on the field. You know, rush the ball, run the ball. You can get a much bigger effect out of the head coach if he just wants to win the way he does, in the boring way. So Iowa's interesting to me. I didn't make a bet on them. A lot of people say they have the easiest schedule, but when Chris said that Penn State, nobody benefited from a college football playoff and scheduling, that is correct. But if you just said from a scheduling, it's Rutgers this year. And I agree with Ralph. I went over on Rutgers this year because they avoid the top 5. They avoid Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Michigan, and Iowa from last year. They avoid all 5 of those games. And I don't even like their quarterback, Kalik Imanis or whatever. Ethan Kalik Imanis.
I don't from Minnesota transfer.
Yeah, I don't like him that much. But at the same time, this schedule is just crying for an over. The only tough game, a non-conference at Virginia Tech, but they got Howard and Akron the first few games. And, you know, getting teams like Illinois, Minnesota at home, UCLA at home, who's rebuilding, Wisconsin at home, Washington at home in a complete rebuild. I agree with that. And I did take Michigan under 9 wins as well. I think it's a situation where there's just still lots of drama with the college football punishments and things going on, and it's just that year where they lost everybody. I know they're going to be good in the trenches, but they have three big L's, and I can't imagine them getting to 9 wins. Chris,
Michigan, I can see like 9 is the ceiling, Because like I said earlier, you're going to lose to Ohio State, you're going to lose to Oregon, and you're going to lose to Texas. Well, that doesn't leave you much margin. Like you got to beat everybody else on your schedule, and I'm not sure that that's going to happen this year. Like, look, but there's no need for Michigan fans to complain and be upset. You won a national title last year. You won a national title. Right. You win a national title. You have like a 3-year period where you're not allowed to be pissed off and upset and cry and call for your coaches to be fired and your team sucks. You got the chip last year.
Exactly. That's the key right there. You got the chip, you know. And I think you guys have the best bet on Penn State making the playoffs. I give you both props for that. That makes total sense. And that coordinator Andy Kotelnicki, from Kansas under Lance Leopold's system. If he's anything like Leopold, this offense is going to start hitting, and their schedule is fantastic. So props to you guys. Big 12 time. And
Kev, let me just jump in one more thing on the Big Ten to remember with your Rutgers play, with our Rutgers play. When you got a coach like Schiano and you have a team that has been bad for so many years, it is huge to get those 15 bowl practices, to go in and get those young kids ready and get excited for next year. I mean, this is 15 years ago. Remember when there was only 20 bowl games and like only one Sun Belt team made it? It was always North Texas, and it was and they would always get the 15 bowl practices, and they always, for 7 straight years, they won the Sun Belt just because they were the best team, best prepared. So don't discount those bowl practices for those teams that aren't regularly bowl teams. It is a big boost going in from one season to the next.
100%. Absolutely. And I think, and I'm excited to see the Scarlet Knights. Sunge, as Chris likes to say.
State University of New Jersey.
There you go. State University of New Jersey. Okay, Big 12 time. And like you guys said, I mean, I can make a case for 12 teams in the Big 12, which is ironic because there's 16 teams, but it's just so close. I did take an under on Cincinnati, 5.5. I know they have the easier schedule of the 4 bad teams there, but out of the bad teams, I just think Scott Satterfield, he's got a new quarterback. They don't run the ball well. Lots of questions with this team. They only rank 57th in the net transfer portal. But that's my only underwin. To be honest with you, I like Kansas State the most to win the Big 12 this year. I think Ralph mentioned that earlier, and I got them at 4-1. I think I actually kind of spread it out in this. And there's 2 teams with defenses that you can kind of trust. It's Kansas State and it's Utah. You know, Utah's the team switching conferences. You already know I don't like a team switching conferences that much. So I took Kansas State, and I really like their coach at Kansas State. I think they'll have a chip on their shoulder losing their quarterback to Ohio State and all that. But I took 2 long shots. I almost went UCF at 10-1, but instead I just bailed for Baylor at 65-1. And the reason is I like Dave Aranda. I remember when Dave Aranda had that great first year, nobody expected it, but I just feel like he might be able to get them back together. And maybe if there is another defense to be had in the Big 12, it will be Baylor. And I took West Virginia for a half star at 20-1 as well, because I thought that offense was very underrated last year. And they have a couple running backs there that were pretty fantastic. And West Virginia returned a lot of people, and nobody's talking about West Virginia either. So I'll be okay because I'm larger on Kansas State at 4-1. If they win it, then I don't have to worry about my smaller bets. But I decided to spread the love a little bit just because I can make a case for all these guys. Chris, what do you think?
I have a lot of thoughts on the Big 12, and I don't think this is the league where you can just say it's as easy as Utah, Kansas State, and Oklahoma State, which seems to be the consensus opinion here. I think you could go 1 through 7 or maybe even 8 in this league, and the difference is minimal. And that's why I kind of hit on earlier about how I played under 1.5 teams from the Big 12 to make the college football playoff. I think you mentioned UCF, and I don't know why you bailed on UCF. KJ Jefferson and Gus Malzahn on his offense is going to be a problem. I actually played RJ Harvey at 50-1 to win the Doak Walker. I mean, he was a semifinalist for the award last year. Wasn't even the guy until like game 4 or 5 last year. Ran for over 1,400 yards. He's going to have some bigger stage games now that they're in the Big 12. I think the way that you get some of the teams, I think they got Colorado, Arizona, and Utah in Orlando with the bounce house. Like UCF I got them 13-1 to make the college football playoff. I played them over their win total. And Iowa State, as the Ralph had mentioned before, I think they are another team. I played at 10-1 to win the league as well. So I bought two teams and kind of chopped some odds down, hoping one of the long shots win. But I think UCF, Iowa State both have excellent chances to win this league. And then I played a couple of head-to-head win totals as well. I played Kansas, more wins than Arizona. I wonder about the coaching change in Tucson. I know McMillan and Fafita are there. I've heard conflicting reports about McMillan and a foot injury. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? Then I heard he was out there with the red non-contact jersey. So, like, if he doesn't play and he's not fully healed, like, all bets are off with Arizona because they got nobody behind him at wide receiver. They still lost almost their entire defensive line rotation. I want to see how the Brennan move in there goes. I think this is a team that anytime a team kind of comes out of nowhere one year, and then the next year, like, everybody's on them, that worries me a little bit. So I think Arizona might be a little inflated. But look, if Jalen Daniels stays healthy, I mean, I know that's a big if anyone stays healthy, but I'm not sure the Koltoniki and Matt Lubick losses are as big. I mean, you bring in Jeff Grimes now and some other people that Leipold is familiar with. I know you don't have a true home field this year because they're redoing Memorial Stadium, but I like Kansas head-to-head, more wins than Arizona. And I like UCF, more wins than SMU. I know Ralph is high on SMU, but I'm super high on UCF at plus 160. I figured I'd take a chance at that because SMU, again, are they maybe more equipped now to handle it? But if you go back last 10 games against these Power 5 teams, they're 1-9. Can they build through the portal now to compete with these teams? Because the recruiting rankings certainly don't suggest that they will. I think UCF has a bit more talent than SMU, so I played UCF, more wins than SMU at plus 160.
Geez, Chris, if I add UCF to my three teams, I have no room to hedge, man. It's like one of those four better win it. You're talking me into it, dude. But it's just one of those situations where, God, I was close. I'll shop it around this weekend and next weekend when I'm in at the Circa area and see if I can find a good number on it. Maybe I'll hop in with you and just pray for the best in that one. But I think Ralph might be high on one of those teams, talking from what he said in the beginning, Ralph.
Yeah, I played Houston under 4.5. That was my highest juice one at minus 170. I still feel that there's value. I played Oklahoma State over 7.5 wins, minus 130. Played Kansas State to win, and I played Iowa State at 10-1 to win as a flyer, as a small bet. And, now it's easy to say, oh, Iowa State's got 20 returning starters, and Conley has them as the number one most, returning production. But, you look at last year, when you have a team that went 7-6, you expect them to be, plus a few yards per game, or basically around the 500-yard, even. They were number 31 last year at plus 1.0 yards per play. That is not like a 7-6 team. No. And let's remember this. They had a freshman, Becht, at quarterback. Now he's in his second year. And when you look at Becht, when I broke down his numbers, his average yards per attempt in September as a freshman, 7.1, dinking and dunking. In October, 7.3, dinking and dunking. The last 2 months of the season, a 10.8 yards per attempt and a 10-1 ratio. Now you have a kid who's in his second year. And, oh, yeah, by the way, you don't play Utah and Kansas State to the last 2 games of the year. So you will absolutely be prepared if you have that team. So where they play the top teams is important, too, when you have a young quarterback, even though they're returning. So that are my 3. And if we got a minute, I'm going to give out 2 game bets that I already bet involving Big 12 teams. So if I say Stanford, you're going to say, well, you got to be betting the under. But I'm not, and I'm not drunk. TCU is playing Stanford game 147-148 week 1, and the total is 61. And I like the over. I bet the over, and I gave it out to my clients. First off, last year TCU used 4 quarterbacks. No one's going to have success if you use 4 quarterbacks. And you had a redshirt freshman Hoover who came in, and even though he was the third quarterback, and then in the bowl someone came in and played all but 1 snap in the game. You look at Hoover, and with Dykes as the head coach, he doesn't care if you're a freshman or a sophomore. He had three games with 50-plus attempts, so they're going to throw the ball. They were number 2 in plays per game last year. Again, tempo and an experienced quarterback. Dykes was 11-4 over-under versus non-conference teams, and when he's playing a non-conference opponent with a total of 60 or higher, he's 20-6, 77% to the over. In season openers, he's averaged 42 points. His game has averaged 73 points. Now, Stanford, Taylor took over last year and had nobody back. The covers were empty. But this guy came from Sacramento State, and he was one of the fastest-paced FCS teams in the country. Last year, after Stanford averaged 58 plays per game for the last 3 years of the old regime, they went up to 70 plays. I expect them to get to 75 or 80 plays this game in the second year of the system. So the line seems high, but I think the Stanford news will get out how much Taylor really wants to press the tempo in this. And I think betting it now is one where you're going to get value, because when they get into camp and they start showing people how fast they're going to go, I think that'll change. And the second one is Arizona. I laid 30 against New Mexico on August 31st. It's 30.5 now. And I talked about the Wildcats, the players that went to high school that kept the group together. Arizona went from 1-11 to 5-7 to 10-3. In their 3 losses last year, they were by 2, 7, and 7 points. And they were a 21, 20-point, and 9-point dog. They were number 17 in yards per play diff. They returned 14 starters. And you have a situation where New Mexico, number 124 in returning production, 9 returning starters. Their 3 offensive starters are 2 wide receivers and a tight end. So you have no running backs, no offensive line back. The Lobos have gone 0-8 against the spread as a dog of 24 or more. Yes, we have a new coach with Mendenhall. We'll see what he changes. But how about this, guys? I've been asked this numerous times, and I found this number intriguing. Since 2014, Game 1 favorites of 24 or more are 52.9%. So basically just above the Mendoza line. But if the FBS team is playing an FCS foe, again, it doesn't matter if it's a season opener. You're not going to get excited to play an FCS opponent. You're 51.1%. If you are a favorite of 24 or more against an FBS foe, you've gone 58.3% since 2014. And Game 1 FBS teams against an FBS opponent laying 28 or more, 42-21, 67%. So don't be afraid to lay the chalk in week 1, because these teams cover the spread.
You got me sitting here thinking earlier about to fire in a little Penn State minus the points week 1 against West Virginia. They fall into that minus 7 to minus 24 range we were talking about earlier, the 18-2-1 angle.
Yeah.
They're on the road, right? At West Virginia? Because they played last year at home. West Virginia left a bad taste in West Virginia's mouth, but that might not matter. Well, okay. Great stuff, man. I wrote this down. I will be really looking at Stanford's tempo change here. Thank you, Ralph. That's why we love having you on, man. Great stuff on that. Those, I'm guessing, killer sports trends that you pulled up, and you are the man with the information. And please retweet that net yards per play difference there. I love looking at those stats that you put out on Wager Talk every single day. Let's move on to the SEC then, and the SEC, baby. I mean, to be honest with you, I have more bets than I want to have. It's an expanded conference now. Obviously, it's the best conference. It's a super conference, in my opinion. But Chris, I believe nobody knows the SEC like you. You've covered it so well over the past years, and I'm gonna give you the floor, man. Give us what you got in the SEC.
I don't have a ton. The win total I like the most here is Missouri under 9.5. I had that minus a quarter. On game day, Reese and I always had a joke about like teams that are like projected to be good only because of the schedule. And Missouri only plays like one of the top 6 teams in the SEC. And like Missouri is a really, really highly thought of team. Like Reese and I always used to joke that if you're not good enough, a loss is going to find you. So yeah, they play Alabama, but it's not like Oklahoma and South Carolina and Auburn are ultimately going to be pushovers for Missouri where and when they play them during the year. You lose Schrader, you lose your defensive coordinator, you lose a half a dozen key contributors on that defense and Baker. I get Cook and Burden are a great duo. You won all 4 of your one-possession games a year ago. I think you're getting a little too much. Oh, my, we beat Ohio State in the bowl game. Like, no, you didn't. Nobody played in the bowl game for Ohio State. It was one of the worst bowl performances that you could have had for Ohio State. Like, you're getting overrated for that. Like, 10 to beat me from Missouri, I'll take my chances. I played under 9.5 from Missouri, and I played the prop that I got Chris Andrews to put up at South Point there, Ohio State and Georgia versus the field to win the national championship. I just don't think the way the playoff is structured for a team that is going to have to beat Ohio State or Georgia most likely in the semifinal, and then most likely Ohio State or Georgia in the final. I don't think the list of people that can do that is very, very long at all. So I did play that prop that either Ohio State or Georgia will win the national championship. And I mentioned earlier I played Ohio State and Georgia to make the college football playoff. I'm kind of thinking about maybe an Ole Miss under, just again, because I think there's a wide variety of outcomes for the Rebels. I think they are super talented, but it always seems like they're in a game that they shouldn't necessarily be in. So while I think maybe at 6 where they are in the preseason might be right, wouldn't surprise me to see them maybe fall a little bit from the lofty preseason expectations they have. I played Arkansas under 5 wins. It's now 4.5. I think I would still play it. This was an offensive line that was terrible last year. I know Sam Pittman's saying all the right things in the offseason. You bring in Bobby Petrino now, who's kind of running things offensively, brought in Taylor Green from Boise. The receivers are okay, but I think between defensively, how much they got run on last year and beat up and some of the losses that they had, I think you run down that schedule, and outside the game against Arkansas Pine Bluff, there isn't a game that you're going to say Arkansas is going to win. So I got it at 5. It's 4.5, so I know that's a bit of a risk, but at a better like price than I did with 5 minus whatever it was. You're probably going to get a little bit of a fairer vig if you go under 4.5.
Wow, there you go. So Ole Miss, a lot of people are on Ole Miss this year, Chris. I
like kind of going against the teams that are super hyped early in the year, might be a bit inflated. Maybe I'm just being contrarian for the sake of being contrarian, but I think more often than not, a lot of these teams that are super high and pumped up in the offseason, they wind up losing a game or 2 here and there that they probably shouldn't.
Yeah, that's very possible. Absolutely. Okay. Well, I agree with a lot of that. The funny thing about Missouri is you look at the schedule, it's just so tempting, but they are what, people that bet for years, they look for these situations. The team that just never won all of a sudden has the good year. Everybody's on them. I mean, it's kind of, it reminds me of Michigan State with Mel Tucker, right? That all of a sudden Michigan State, but Mel Tucker, then next year, just absolute.
The abuse that I took from Michigan State fans in what was it, 2021 was their good year where they won all those ridiculous games. The Nebraska game they had no business winning, and they wound up beating Michigan. And then it was like, okay, fine, congratulations, good, you had it. And then the following year, the other shoe fell, and like reality and regression came back and got him good. And I just kind of sat there and smiled and doubled up my bet from the previous year, and it was in good shape. And then, oh, by the way, the following year, Mel Tucker was out of a job. So
I'm sure they all apologized too. And
oh no, yeah, absolutely. They were very, very, very gracious losers.
Sure. Ralph, what do you got for the SEC, man?
I'll bring this up. I wasn't going to bring it up because it was minus 190, and it's a line that wasn't even there. I bet Arkansas under 5.5 wins minus 190 right when it came out.
I hate
now. No, so just so people know, it is a huge difference in college football and NFL for a whole line to move. Because in college football, when you have a team like Ohio State, you're only really handicapping 3 games. You're handicapping the Michigan game, the Oregon game, and Penn State. So you have so many fewer moving parts. So in college football, I would suggest maybe people should think it should be about an 80 or 90% difference for one win. That's just, the gauge I use. So if you're going to FanDuel and they have a 5 and you're going to somewhere else that has a 4.5 and someone else has 5.5, if you're comparing the juice, that just sort of gives them a gauge of where I think they should look at. If it's 80 cents about where the value would be betting the higher or lower number, if you could find that. My top SEC one is I'm going to swallow the Kool-Aid. I bet A&M over 8.5 wins. It was minus 120. You got to remember, there's another team that used 4 quarterbacks. People tend to forget that. I don't know if I've seen a team that used 4 different quarterbacks and was still plus 74 yards per game in SEC action. That's amazing. They went 0-4 in all the games decided by a touchdown or less. This year, they have 5 games as a favorite of minus 14 or higher. So give those 5 games a win. You have 7 games between the 8s, plus 8 and minus 8. At home, minus 1 to Notre Dame. At home, minus 3 to Missouri, minus 2 to LSU, and plus 3 against Texas. On the road, minus 6 at Florida, minus 4 at Auburn, minus 8 at South Carolina. So if you win 2 of those 4 home games, you win one of those away favorite roles, and you're in that situation. So that's what I bet. I bet 1 game in the SEC. Actually, that's in the independent, so I'll wait on that. I have one more stat, you guys, that'll blow your mind. And I don't know why I found this. I was going through, I was doing the Gold Sheet top 25 team previews. So I was trying to find interesting tidbits like I found on Franklin for teams. And I was going through and I was looking at SEC teams that play back-to-back road games in conference play and said that really has to be a disadvantage. How about, now this has only been good since 2020. If it goes before 2020, it was basically 50-50. Since 2020, the last 4 years, when an SEC team is an away dog on a second straight road game, they are 23-4, 85.2% against the spread. You want to talk about me? I had to check that 3 times because I said there's no way in hell that's the right number. So I'm going to go
consecutive conference road games, the second road game.
Yeah, they have to be a dog in a second straight road game. SEC teams. Yeah, 23-4, 85.2% against the spread.
That's one of those things. Like when you think about it, it's counterintuitive because I think, like you said, your reaction. Everybody would think, oh, there's no way they're going to. I mean, a dog. Oh, the following week are going to go on the road and get drilled again in this conference. The numbers probably inflated, and you're getting a team and you're getting a couple extra points. So yeah, it's one of those things about the way the numbers work. That's incredible.
Yeah, people think one way. It's like, oh, the second road game in a row. That's so rough. No, it's not. And
Ralph sent me crawling back into my shell, man. I feel like a terrible person now that he got 5.5, and I said, yeah, 4.5, I would still play.
Oh,
but
no.
I like your A&M thought, man, because I think the culture change with Elko coming there and Jimbo out, Wigman back. The biggest thing for them is going to be, can they replace Anaya Smith and Evan Stewart? Because, I mean, they did lose the back, which is a big deal, but I think they're going to be okay there. Defensively, Nolan and some guys are gone, but they've recruited so well, and they got Nick Skirton from Purdue. I love them week 1 against Notre Dame. I think that Notre Dame offensive line that is beat up. I don't think Notre Dame has difference makers at wide receiver. I think defensively they're good. I'm not sold that Riley Leonard is this generational, like Heisman contender type quarterback, like a lot of people think they are. Like I got A&M at a pick there, and I think it's moved to 1 now, and it's fine. But I like your thoughts on A&M, Ralph.
I just had to fast forward to week 1 already, guys. Okay.
Well, hey, we're a full service podcast.
We certainly are. That's the game I wanted to talk about, but we will. And we're almost there. Quick in the SEC, I took Bama under 9.5. It's not like they changed conference, but their coach did. I think it's going to be a welcome to the SEC with Kalen DeBoer. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I think he's going to have the better offense in general, at least as the time goes on. But I'm not a big Jalen Milroe guy. For some reason, he's not himself sometimes. They're dead beat in that Auburn game. That push off at the end, whatever. They should have lost to A&M in Arkansas. I think they have a tricky schedule. They should beat Wisconsin by 10 points, but it's tricky. And then you got Georgia on deck right after Wisconsin. It's not that look ahead spots are really a thing, but that maybe it's since Georgia at Tennessee, at LSU, at Oklahoma. The Iron Bowl at the end again. I see 9 wins for Alabama most likely. I don't see them going past. I do have Ole Miss power rated a little bit higher than Alabama this year. I want to see it with Kalen DeBoer, and I want to see this defense. So I did that. I took Florida over 4.5 at -150. Disrespectful spread. I think the team's just going to kind of come in with chips on their table. They're going to be like, well, everyone already hates us. Let's just beat everybody. I feel – I know Graham Mertz was a good completion percentage. Now his ADOT was only 6.4 too. So I will say that, you got to look into what completion percentage really is these days. But I think they get to 5 wins at Florida. And I took Vanderbilt over 2.5, and I laid -165, Chris. And I'll tell you right now, they are New Mexico State. Is that good? Well, it's probably better than what it's probably better than what Vanderbilt was. You got Dylan Pavia there, right? Who beat Auburn last year. But here's the thing. You already have your 3 wins because you got Elkhorn, you got Ball State, both at home, and then at Georgia State. By God, if you have to beat South Carolina or something because you lost to Georgia State, Vanderbilt should get over 2.5 wins. And it's funny. I find it pathetic that they had to pretty much bring everybody, including their coach, from New Mexico State over as a consultant. But at the same time, I think it's still better than what they had, Ralph.
Yeah, well, it's Vanderbilt. It's you said New Mexico State. By the way, New Mexico State was the team that went over their win total by most games last year. They went over by 4.5 wins. Arizona went over by 4. Missouri, Miami of Ohio, West Virginia, Northwestern by 3.5. On the flip side, Baylor was 4 games under their season win total. And then Pittsburgh, FAU, East Carolina, and Buffalo were -3.5 under. So I'll have to go through the last few years and take a look at the teams that overachieved or underachieved. I'll shoot you guys an email if I get that done to see what happens to the top 10 teams that overachieved one year on their season win totals to the next, and those that underachieved by 2.5 games or more. So no idea what the response will be, but as I'm looking at that chart, reading those numbers, I'll throw that out.
I'm excited to get it, Ralph. Now you have to do it. Independence or the Pac-2? I got nothing. That's all I got to say. I got nothing. I want to see the Pac-2 in the playoffs. It's not going to happen, but I got nothing. Chris?
Pass.
Pass for Chris. Ralph?
I bet 1 game, and I normally don't bet games in October and November this early, but this is one just because of a scheduling spot. Because when the schedule makers make their schedule, they're just basing it on the team talent now. They're not going through and breaking down the schedule. But we talked about Florida State having a shot to win the Big 12. When they play Notre Dame in late October or November, Notre Dame's a 3.5-point favorite. Notre Dame is going to be off 3 games where the average line was -22 and a bye. So they play sister of the poor, sister of the poor, sister of the poor, and have a bye. FSU will be playing their 3rd road game in 4 weeks. They'll be off Duke, Miami of Florida, and North Carolina. And again, if Florida State happens to run the gamut and they're undefeated, that Notre Dame game isn't the most important game. It's winning the ACC and doing that. So you may see them have less interest in that game. So the way I have the teams power rated with the scheduling spot, that is a game I laid Notre Dame -3.5. I played that already. That's currently at FanDuel and DraftKings available now.
And that could be also a point in the year where if things don't go well for Florida State, that the wheels might come off a little bit. And they went up there a few years back in a bad situation, I think, and got run out there, which wasn't a good situation.
Yeah, that's very true. DJU, I'm not super high on DJU. I mean, obviously it's an interesting spot. He can get to go get his revenge against Clemson and all that. But, I feel like we would have saw something out of him already if he was a true contender. And I think their offense does take
still be a Clemson.
What's that?
He'd still be a Clemson. He wouldn't have gotten benched and Klubnik would have been.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. He would have still been in Clemson, for sure. Anything for Heisman or any other awards? Chris, you gave us one already, man. I like it.
Yeah, I played. I think Ryan Day to win the Bryant Award is like a no-brainer like play. It's the narrative of these awards. That's how people are voting on these things. Like he's 12-1 to win the Bryant. If they beat, even if they don't beat Oregon, they go to Oregon and lose. They beat Michigan. They win the Big Ten title and get revenge against Oregon. Like he's gonna win Coach of the Year. There's no coach out there, or maybe Billy Napier, with more pressure on him this year than Ryan Day. Like told his people, go hard in the portal. He brought in his buddy Chip Kelly to be the offensive coordinator. Like they're all in this year. And if the mission comes through that Ryan Day saved his job and can finally win the big game, which is garbage, by the way, because he's won plenty of big games. He played for the national championship and almost beat Georgia 2 years ago when they won the national championship.
Missed field goal.
But yeah, exactly. But if they win the Big Ten 12-1, like that's a bet that you just kind of like need to make and file away. Hopefully you're in a state where you have access to those things. I know not every state has those markets up, but a Ryan Day 12-1 to win the Bryant. I mentioned RJ Harvey to win the Doak at 50-1. I played Jeremiah Smith to win the Blitnikoff at 30-1 as well, the freshman at Ohio State. He is every bit
the real. Wow.
Yeah. And everyone talks about Agbukba, the other wide receiver, but Smith could have been a top 5-10 pick this year. I've been told that there are NFL teams he could start for right now if he went straight to the NFL. So Smith 30-1 to win the Blitnikoff was a ticket I absolutely had to have in my pocket.
So would you have betted if Agbukba went too, where they didn't have a number one and he was actually the number one instead of Agbukba? I mean, because you can't double team him all the time with Agbukba out there. No. Yes, he may get more double teams, but it really does give him so many more opportunities, especially early.
It really does. I think maybe the narrative early on in the year might be like Agbukba is the number one guy, but this guy is a completely different level.
Well, I have not heard one coach or anybody say that he is not like first round. Like right now, if they had to draft tomorrow, he would be a top 5 pick. His talent, he's just a man child that has speed and catches everything. I mean, he is like, remember those pictures of who was the Giants wide receiver with the big hands that would catch him one-handed?
Odell Beckham?
OBJ?
Yeah. Beckham always caught I mean, this guy is just like that. He can go up with one hand. He doesn't need 2 hands, and it's amazing. So I'm excited to watch him play.
He's 150-1 to win the Heisman, too, if you're looking to play someone outside of the obvious quarterbacks. Who, like, I think you can shoot some holes in a lot of these quarterbacks at the top tier. Like, Dylan Gabriel's getting far too much play. You can't play Dylan Gabriel at plus 750 to win the Heisman. Like, it was funny. Like DraftKings has these like correlated parlays out there that they cut a ridiculous price in the whole percentage. Like they got Carson Beck to win the Heisman and Georgia to win the national championship at 20-1. like the true parlay price would be like 35 to 1 on that. Like if you can find a place that lets you do that, like that's not the worst bet in the world, because if Georgia is 11, 12 and 1 and they win the SEC and they're in the playoff and they win the title, like he'll probably wind up winning the Heisman. But I think you can look a lot further down the board than just Ewers, Beck, Shador, like all the obvious quarterbacks that are up there. I think there's some opportunities further down. I just wish they could find the right guy, the right price.
And just FYI, the highest non-quarterback, the lowest odds for a non-quarterback in the Heisman is Luther Burden at 80 to 1. So, and the Ohio State receiver may be as low as him by the time camp starts, and he gets so much more love, and a couple more people watch the podcast now and jump out. And he may be the lowest priced non-QB for the Heisman by the time the season starts.
Kind of makes you sick to have them go from Marvin Harrison to Smith if you're not an Ohio State fan.
Yeah, it's sad that poor Ohio State has no talent whatsoever.
Poor Ohio State, jeez. Well, what would suck if he does win the Heisman and not the Blitnikoff?
I'd be okay with that at 150 to 1.
Well, if you got it, that's what I'm saying. You better bet both to be on the safe side, in that situation. What scares me about Beckett's Heisman, though, is that Georgia might just be blowing teams out, relying on their defense at the end. I almost think that it's an LSU situation every year that you got to look for, even though injury concern to Jalen Daniels from Kansas, but like you said, you got to look farther down the board, in my opinion. I even go ahead.
No, I was going to say, finish your thought.
Jalen Daniels is one. I was even thinking like a Dylan Raiola. Now he's a freshman. He's a true freshman, but the dude's hopped in every high school south of Missouri. He was down here in Chandler when his junior year, won it. Then he goes to Georgia. The dude's a stud. And the reason that he went to Nebraska, because I think he was promised the starting quarterback there. If he had to stay at Georgia or whatever, he went to been the starter. But he's going to probably transfer out after this year. But Nebraska's got a cake first 7 games, so he's won at 100-some to 1 that you can find right now. That maybe by week 7 he might even be somewhat of a favorite. Now, of course, that's when their schedule gets hard. But like you said, Chris, I think you look down the board for a lot of these. I did with the Doak Walker Award,
and I think these markets will change so much during the year. I remember sitting at the Big Noon set last year when we were in South Bend for Notre Dame USC, which was mid-October, pouring rain, and I'm going through my apps, and I bet Jaden Daniels that day at 30 to 1 to win the Heisman, mid-October, 30 to 1. And like that, you're going to get some wild swings, and if you time it right and you're religiously look, you're going to wind up getting some better numbers than are out there right now.
Absolutely.
Kiev, you made a great point, because a decade ago, you had to be an undefeated team or a one-loss team, and, you were a good quarterback, you're a Heisman. Now, the 2 freaking worst defenses in the FBS is the reason your guys won the Heisman, because you had to keep chasing points, and you're on the field so much that you kept having to produce in order to win. So your point about Georgia, you sort of said it in jest, is actually a fairly legitimate point, which we see the last 2 years.
And Lamar Jackson, the team that wound up going 1-9, he won.
Yeah. LSU had 3 or 4 losses last year. I can't remember. Maybe it was 3. But it's not that team that makes the playoffs necessarily. Maybe I don't know if it'll probably be a criteria now that there's 12 teams, but there's certainly a lot of options you can look down, because there's a Big 12 team that's making the playoffs. So just even think about that. The Doak Award. So what I took the Penn State running back Singleton at 70 to 1, Chris, and it was kind of it was the same reasons that you guys kind of talked about, but I think now that with Kotonicki over there, he's going to be the one running back instead of sharing it like he did last year. I mean, if you remember Andy Kotonicki over at Kansas, he favored Neal. He favored Neal a lot. I think he's going to favor Singleton this year, and Singleton was a little bit banged up this year, but like that schedule says, it says that Penn State's still going to be running the ball a lot, in my opinion. They ran it at Kansas. I think at 70 or 80 to 1, where you can get it right now, that's where I like it. Don't get me wrong. I still like yours as well, man. The RJ Harvey one, I like that a lot too. It's
because Ollie Gordon's not going to win it again. You can't play him to win the award.
He's 3.5 to 1 too. Jeez,
it's just, you're wasting money. It was like Caleb Williams last year was never going to win the Heisman again.
Yeah, absolutely. For the Doak Walker. So there's 2 plays that Chris and I like. Moving into week 1, I think Chris let it out of the bag that he's on A&M for college football week 1. I feel pretty bad about that because I bet Notre Dame, Chris.
It's all right. You should have bet each other. You should have bet each other and said there's no juice.
Well, I got +1, but you got picked. So yeah, but still no juice. Not much juice on that. 5 cents maybe. But anyways, my thought. This is so interesting because you have the coach against Riley Leonard, that coach Riley Leonard at Duke, right, with Mike Elko. I think that's the big story behind this game. But in that situation, I almost feel like the kid's going to win it because of that. I know, and I bet this before the offensive lineman injury and all that with Notre Dame. So I don't know if I would have thought the same seeing that. It sucks to see injuries. But at the same time, I just feel like he's going to do. But I think the truth is, I think under 47 is still available. And I almost bet that before the show. I forgot to. I think I'm going to bet under 47 in the Notre Dame Texas A&M game, Chris. And it's going to be a fun first week of games.
Yeah, totally. And the only other thing I have in pocket right now for week 1, I'm going to wait. Like I said, I'm going to wait on that UCLA Hawaii game. I should say.
Yeah.
I had Ralph's Arizona game in my mind. I bet Rice -11 against Sam Houston was the only other thing that I have in pocket right now for week 1.
Okay, how about you, Ralph? You gave us the under already at USC.
Yeah. I gave you a couple. I have Arizona -30. It's now 30.5. I have that under in USC LSU, and I thought I gave one more out. TCU Stanford over 61. So those are the 3 that I already bet. And I just want to take a second and go on a rant.
Please do.
If I were a Clemson alumni, I would absolutely fire Dabo Swinney. I cannot believe that this guy refuses to pay NIL money, refuses to get a transfer. He is just hurting his team in the ACC, and I just think it's wrong of him to do that to his players, to his alumni, because he's holier than thou. He's taken a statement. I mean, can you imagine? I think he's had 1 transfer in 3 years. I mean, that is just being closed-minded in my idea. So I just wanted to share that on the podcast.
I agree, dude. I mean, if you're a kid and you can, I've always been for kids to make money. I have, and I used to be more of a traditional guy, but at the same time, I do see them kind of being exploited. And what does he make? $10 million a year, Dabo Swinney? And you're a kid, that's not getting paid because of NIL. It's a weird situation, and I think it's going to adversely affect Clemson, not because of that only, but he also is just a hard-nosed guy, and it's great when you're winning if you're a hard-nosed guy like Bill Belichick kind of was, but it's really bad to these Gen Z kids if you're losing to be coaching like that, in my opinion. So it's a great rant, Ralph.
Yeah, you can have your opinion of the portal and NIL. You can not like it, you can be against it. But if it's there, you have to use it. Everybody else is using it. If you're not, you are falling. So it's not coincidental that the decline of Clemson's program has coincided with the start of the portal and NIL and him not bringing in talent. That's why these teams are winning titles. Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, like they're bringing in players in the portal to plug holes that they have. Clemson is not plugging holes that they have in the portal. They're relying on their recruits. That's fine. You can have that philosophy, but if you're not using all of the tools at your disposal to improve your team, you are doing your program, your fans, your team, and yourself a big disservice.
Real quick, got a question. What do you guys think about Air Force over 6.5 wins? I already said that I don't like it because of the new offensive line. I didn't pull up the number exactly because it was already low for an Air Force number. Let's admit that's low for an Air Force number. It's like when I see that, it kind of scares me away. But the number itself tells you that there's a scare to it. I actually have them at 6.86 wins from a calculation standpoint. Ralph, anything?
I have them at 7.03. You know, you're going to be a 30-point favorite against Merrimack, a 12-point favorite against New Mexico, 7-point Navy, 10-point Nevada. So those are 4 games you likely win. You know, after that, you're a dog in 3 games. You're a pick 'em in 3 or 4 games. One positive for them is their toughest games are they have a bye, then they play Wyoming and Navy. They have a bye, then they play Army and Fresno. So if they can get situated, the 2 byes are in very good spots before road games on games that the lines are going to be between the 4s. So if I was making a schedule, that would be the ideal schedule for me when you're having to travel against teams equally talented you. So that is an edge for them. But I have them right in that range, and it's nothing I even came close to playing one way or the other.
Anything, Chris, on that?
Yeah, I got no.
Okay.
Mountain West was a league I did not dive into super rates. I really can't add anything.
Well, after this show, I got a lot to dive in now because I wrote a lot of notes down from you guys. Fantastic stuff as usual, man. Ralph, really appreciate you. Where could I get your great information and all your wonderful statistics?
Well, for those that bet preseason, guys, I put a lot of work into an NFL preseason guide. That's free at Wager Talk. Download it. It goes through all the quarterback rotations, the stats for the last couple of years, coaches' angles. I did a lot for the Gold Sheet College Football Guide. As you showed your schedule, Kiev, with the projected lines based on the power ratings, we have that for every FBS game in the Gold Sheet Guide. So check those 2 free things out at wagertalk.com.
All right, check out wagertalk.com. Chris, where can we get your wonderful columns and great information?
Yeah, foxsports.com. We have some stuff up there today that's fresh and updated. Bear Bets dropped a college football pod this morning. The NFL pod probably up by now, I would hope. Stanford. I said Stanford Steve again this morning on VSiN. Like at 20 years, it's like hard to get out of my head. But myself and Jeff and Sammy P and Will kicked it all around. Obviously, Big Noon Kickoff will be on the air, 10 a.m. local from Morgantown, week 1, Penn State at West Virginia. And I might have to play Penn State -10 due to the 18-2-1 Ralph Michaels angle.
Yeah, there you go. And then more importantly, when you get to Wisconsin, you got to stop at a Culver's and get
it's written down right here. Butter burger, fries, custard, and then the turtle sundae. On
the cheese curds and the cheese curds. Don't forget the cheese curds.
Yes, yeah. Fried cheese curd. Yeah, that's right there too.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, guys. We'll really appreciate it. Best of luck this season. We'll be texting.
Take care, guys.